Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics, and in this video, after a week in which the Tories attempted, unsuccessfully of course, to block legislation designed to protect children from abuse, I'd like to discuss some other examples which have popped up of the Tories and Tory press, and including Kemi Badenoch, of personally, actively really covering up child abuse. But first, for daily political commentary, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So as I've said a few times before, the thing that mostly frustrates me in the world of politics is when people say one thing, but do the opposite. I'm comfortable with people having views very much at odds with my own, if they are genuinely held. It means you can have a debate and people can make their own minds up. But when you argue for one thing in a way which means deliberately delivering the opposite, that's frankly evil. In the last week, Labour were presenting a piece of legislation which will give children better protection against abuse, as it creates, amongst other things, a legal duty for suspicions to be reported. The Conservatives tried to kill the bill off with an amendment which they claimed was demanding an inquiry into grooming gangs, but it wasn't. The text of the amendment showed that it was there to stop the legislation passing any further in Parliament. Not that the media really reported this. But it goes back further than this. The Mirror have reported that Victoria Atkins, now she's in Badenoch's shadow cabinet, but back in 2018, a government minister for safeguarding, and she blocked a move for mandatory reporting of child abuse. So what good reason did the Tory government 6 years ago have for not requiring people to report child abuse? Like, what good reason can you think of? Like, oh yeah, there's probably a good case for not reporting child abuse. Atkins simply said the case had not been made. Now, who seriously argues that people, especially professionals in close contact with children, should see evidence of child abuse and not report it? Who does that? Who argues that? Seriously, who makes that argument? Well, as it happens, the Conservatives. So in government, they blocked moves to improve the reporting of child abuse and therefore the ability to intervene early. And in opposition, they are still attempting to do the same when Labour are actively trying to boost child protections. You know, someone who worked as an independent advisor for the Conservative government also had a little bit of interesting information about Robert Jenrick, because he's like trying to lead the charge on this. So the massive national inquiry, which has already taken place and was ordered by the Conservatives, it's basically what the Conservatives in government did in terms of child protection, although they never implemented the recommendations. But they ordered an inquiry. It was a huge inquiry into organised child sexual abuse. It took 7 years. It heard evidence from across the country, of course, because it was a national inquiry. The advisor in question, John Mann, revealed that when it came time for the inquiry to hear evidence from Robert Jenrick's neck of the woods, and he was MP there at the time, he was nowhere to be seen. There were 30 days of hearings in his area, according to this guy. You know, children being abused and raped in that area. 30 days of hearings. And Robert, I really care about abused kids, honest, Jenrick, did not attend for a single minute during any of those 30 days of hearings when he was a local MP there. These people who were in government and in a position to push for better child protection laws, and even had a £200 million inquiry to lead the way, did nothing. It was also revealed that Kemi Badenoch had never met a single victim of child sexual abuse, and also said she sees no reason to do so in the future. Yet we're supposed to believe that the Tory leader, who just tried to sink child protection laws, cares about the protection of children, when she won't even meet any. Seriously, if the media even attempted to do their jobs properly, these ghouls would never get close to frontline politics. The only reason that they are in such senior positions is because the media cover for them. And speaking of the media, they're a dab hand at the cover-up as well, not just of politicians. This one was spotted by Otto English, who's an author who points out misinformation quite regularly. It's a tale of two headlines, I suppose. So the first is from the Mail. The convoluted headline reads, Earl Spencer's, that's like Princess Diana's brother or something, isn't it? Earl Spencer's prep school becomes latest victim of Labour's VAT raid on fees as it announces it will close in July after being quote, adversely affected by external factors. Now, the Tory media have been like rabid dogs when it comes to the VAT on private school fees. They won't let it go. But whenever they cite a school closing down, which they attribute to Labour's VAT policy, it always turns out that the real reason is something else. Quite often the fact that their takings have been going down over many years, right? And this is no exception, but for a different reason. So the headline quotes being adversely affected by external factors. Now, because they've just said that this is related to Labour's VAT policy, you are supposed to infer that they mean VAT making their business model unsustainable. Which straight away, if you think about it, seems a bit odd for a school attended by the wealthy aristocracy. They may not like paying a bit extra, but they absolutely will, and they can certainly afford to. But as always with the Mail, the lies in the headline, and they are lies, are exposed in the article itself. Because again, and it's not the first time I've had to say this, they think they can just tell lies in a headline, like lies, not just be misleading, actual lies in a headline, and then correct themselves in the article, and it's suddenly all fine. As if everyone who reads the headline will read the article, when in actual fact only a small percentage will. So it mentions this other factor, which is the real reasons for the school's closure, which actually is described more prominently in the BBC article of the same story, because they put it in the headline. Earl Spencer's school to close amid abuse inquiry. That's right. Like a lot of posh boarding schools, this one was basically a child abuse farm. The guy mentioned by both the Mail and the BBC had made public, Spencer had made public, the physical and sexual abuse he suffered there as a child, and he certainly wasn't the only one. In deciding to present the story in the way it did, the Mail is not just trying to overreach for any excuse to complain about the VAT that their journalists are going to have to pay to continue sending their spawn to private school, because that's the real reason they go on about it. If you wonder why the right-wing press are constantly going on about VAT on school fees, a lot of the stuff they push is in the interest of their billionaire owners. This is not one of them. The very wealthy, they don't really care. They don't actually care about VAT on school fees. If they chunter at all, it's just because of the principle. They just don't like paying taxes on principle. But if you're very wealthy, if you're worth tens of millions of pounds or hundreds of millions of pounds or especially billions of pounds, the school fees are negligible. They're like peanuts. So putting VAT on them is just like a coating on a peanut. The 93% of the population who don't send their kids to private school, well, they don't care because, well, they don't send their kids to private school. It's only those on incomes that are high enough to afford private school fees, but not so high that they can afford an increase in those fees without maybe having to think about sacrificing their annual visits to the Swiss ski chalet, for example, which, of course, you know, journalists fall into the category of. But what the Mail are effectively doing here is it's not just that they're using it as an excuse to moan at taxes. They are downplaying the impact of child abuse in our private boarding schools, as if to say that rampant child abuse isn't a credible reason for a school to shut down, so it must be Labour's tax policies which did it. And, you know, and this is, we often think this is one of the reasons why, when you think to yourself, why in 2018 did the Conservative government not just say, yeah, of course we should get people to report child abuse? Like, why wouldn't they do that? Well, it's because quite a lot of them went to private school, went to boarding school. Many Conservative MPs are themselves the victims of child abuse. But it's a form of child abuse they're not taught is child abuse. They just think it's normal. So maybe they just have really no empathy with actual victims as well, because they don't recognise themselves as victims. And it's one of the things which makes future inquiries into child abuse much more difficult, because the situation right now, so we had a massive inquiry with recommendations which still need to be implemented. When it comes to local features, because in some local areas there are particular idiosyncrasies which are unique to them, well, we've also had local inquiries that have looked at that, and they continue to take place, which the local authorities need to implement. So right now, what we need to do is put in place the recommendations arising for those inquiries. You can't do that at the same time as you hold a new inquiry, because you can't tell someone to conduct an inquiry into, say, just specifically grooming gangs, right? Because as they do so, it'll take some time. You're implementing laws which fundamentally change the environment. So after a year of them carrying out some studies, that year's wasted because you've now changed the law and therefore changed practices, and they've got to start again and keep starting. So it can't go on. So one of two things has to happen. You either wait until you've implemented the current recommendations and have an inquiry later, or you have an inquiry now and you delay the implementation of the recommendations we've had for a couple of years, which means that children are being kept in danger while you have another inquiry. So, which of course the Conservatives would love. Absolutely love that, as well as Reform UK. But in reality, you know, not the victims who understand the process. They want action now. But it is interesting that the Tories and Tory media will claim to be appalled by cases of child sexual abuse in some instances and yet work hard to cover it up in others. Why didn't the Tories lift a finger to do anything about it in government? Why didn't the Tory media inform the public that the Conservative government were ignoring their own inquiry at the time? Why have they only now decided to take an interest after a foreign immigrant in America, who is openly calling for the UK to be invaded, decided to push disinformation on the subject? But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.